All right, so here we go. We've got a video on the Congress of Vienna and Latin America. And what I'm going to try to do is catch you up with the events that occurred after the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, and then transfer over and talk about how the French Revolution really inspired a lot of the Latin American revolutionaries overseas. So let's begin with just a quick map to show you the extent of the French Empire. Of course, you know that Napoleon was defeated by Russia in the scorched earth policy. First, he was sent to the island of Elba, and then to St. Helena later. And so when Napoleon is defeated, there is a call. There is a call to try to rebuild Europe. So once he's exiled at St. Helena for the last time, Europe needs to be rebuilt. It's in chaos. You know, everyone's been fighting each other. So we need to fix this. And under Napoleon, France had so much power that it was like, okay, we need to make sure that no one nation gets too powerful, and that's what we call a balance of power. So there becomes two sort of ideologies between the two. You have the conservatives who are favoring this traditional standard government, and then you've got the liberals who are saying, no, we need to get less government. Like, government is the problem here. We need to actually reduce it a little bit and focus on giving any government that's in power needs to be one that pursues the natural rights of all people. And so you get this like clash, this John Locke, Thomas Hobbes kind of clash again, thinking back to the Enlightenment, right? So it's just playing out in a different way here at the Congress of Vienna. And so at the Congress, you should know that the leaders are coming together and they're deciding, who's going to gain territory, who's going to lose territory. And there's three major principles. Legitimacy, those who wanted a king. Compensation, those who wanted land from fighting Napoleon, and then balance of power. Don't let one nation get too strong, but don't let one nation get too weak either. You've got to find that nice balance so that if everyone's at relatively the same power, everybody will be afraid to fight one another. If everyone's on the same power level, maybe you won't have as much conflict, or so they think. And so they meet, Congress of Vienna, and they discuss. And so you discuss legitimacy. I believe that there should be monarchs, and this is one of the principles that really drives the Congress of Vienna. Keep the kings in power. Go back to the absolute monarchy. Make sure that kings have total power. Places like Russia are going to be fighting for compensation because, scorched earth policy. I mean, they destroyed so much of their land. They feel like they should get some. They want Poland to sort of protect them and create a barrier between them and the rest of Europe so that they'll be protected. And then we've talked about balance of power enough. Prince Clemens von Metternich is really going to fight for this as much as he can. And Clemens von Metternich is the host of this thing. You've got the Tsar of Russia. You've got little William, who was said to have needed a nanny to sort of shepherd him around and make sure that he was on task at the Congress of Vienna. You've got Castlereagh, who tries to get as much as he can from the Congress of Vienna. And last but not least, you've got Talleyrand, who is also just trying to hang on in many ways, Talleyrand hoping for a king. So here's Metternich, believes in the balance of power, right? Make sure that all nations have an equal shot and making sure that they're not too powerful. This way, they'll be less likely to fight, because if you know that your other nations are powerful too, then you know that those other nations can put you down, put you in your place. So you got Tsar Alexander, who really wants that compensation for the scorched earth policy, particularly one of Poland. You've got Talleyrand, who is saying, we need to go back to a king. We need to go back to making sure that France is stable again. And so he's looking for another Louis to get up there and take over the throne. And so Louis the 18th, right? If you haven't heard enough of Louis, he wants another one. You've got William, who's talking about, hey, no, Prussia has fought this Napoleonic force, and we want compensation for all the destruction. So you've got Prussia, and then you've got Russia. So, and just background for you, Prussia is just one Germanic state. It's the most powerful one, but it's one Germanic state. And Germany is not one nation yet. It's still trying to get peace together. And in later lectures, I'll talk about how they do that under Otto von Bismarck. More on that in a little while. Okay, and he wants this place called Saxony in the middle of Europe. I'll show you it on a map, but essentially he's looking for Saxony. He's looking for territory that he believes should be German territory or Prussian territory at this point. You've got Viscount Castlereagh, who is fighting for a balance of power, but more specifically, they're really looking for those colonies. They're going to take these colonies from France, and they're going to want to use them to fulfill their mercantilist policy. That is, that you're going to take colonies for one purpose, to support your mother country, to make profits, okay? And so they've got a policy in place that says, we're going to use these colonies for their natural resources, and eventually, this is going to be the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, so all these colonies become the natural resources necessary for Britain. And so basically what they're doing here is they're carving up Britain. They're carving up France, I'm sorry. And they're taking advantage of the French here. The French clearly don't have one ruler anymore. They're certainly in turmoil, and so everyone's trying to get a cut of France down below there. And they'll do whatever they can to make sure that France is punished. So there you go. You got your players, Congress of Vienna. So what happens? First, Germany is separated. They do not want Germany to become one nation because there's a worry, especially among the British, that if Germany becomes one strong nation, they will rival the British. They will rival all the other nations and will upset the balance of power. And truth be told, the Germans are right now, they're angry that they're not one nation, and they're going to be fighting to bring that one nation together. Eventually they will, but not yet. They come up with a principle called the principle of intervention. Basically says, if one monarch starts to fall, every other monarch on the block is going to come to their aid. Fast, quick. Not like they did with Louis XVI, where they sort of like, he was almost out, he was almost Austria, got caught, and eventually had his head chopped off. No one came to his aid immediately, and no one did it decisively enough. They didn't all come together fast enough, and so Louis was killed. So they said, no, we got to make sure that doesn't happen. We don't want any more revolutions. The moment that people rise up, everyone else put them down. Okay, this is the monarchs taking control. And of course, Russia is going to take Poland, and they're going to take Poland so that they create a little buffer zone between them and Prussia and the rest of the European nations. They believe that it is theirs to hold on to. So that's the broken up, fragmented states of what will eventually be Germany, but it's not Germany yet. So there we go. Other results, Austria gains part of Saxony. Prussia will split the other half, so they try to find a balance between the two. Britain will take those French colonies in Africa. Again, a whole lecture on that. There's so much more to that. And last but not least, they're going to put a monarch on the throne. Louis XVIII is coming, so not a lot of change as far as France goes. Their borders are going to be cut back just a little bit from the post-Napoleon to you're going to scale them back. And so these are the results of the Congress of Vienna. What do you need to know? I really want you to know that the goal of the Congress of Vienna was to provide stability, to make sure to fix Europe, if you will, after all of the damage that Napoleon has caused, and bring this back to a stable area. Okay, stability. Eventually that German Federation is going to come together, but man, I've got to wait. So, how do we connect this to Latin America? I want you to know that Latin America hears the cries of what's going on in Europe. Particularly in a place called Haiti, they're going to really hear the cries because the French are losing control of Haiti, and they try to fight and put down a rebellion. And so the French Revolution and the ideas behind it and the Enlightenment philosophes, all those things that made the French want to rise up, when the French get freedom from a king, the Latin American nations start to say, maybe we can do it too. In addition, you get the American Revolution, which inspires Latin Americans, because it's like, wow, you just defeated one of the very powerful nation in Great Britain. You did it. Why can't we defeat Spain, who is a declining nation, who is really losing a lot of their power? Why can't we do this? And so what happens next is we're going to get revolution. But to understand these revolutions, I want you to understand why they're fought with such fury, and why the system is the way it is. And it starts with really colonialism. It starts with the arrival of Christopher Columbus and the debates going on. And so this is a lot of Global 9 stuff that I'm going to hit you with, but it will give you the context you need to understand why these people want to revolt so badly, and ultimately why why they're fighting so hard to make sure that they win, right? This is deeper than just wanting to be free. This is about the terrible, terrible history that they've been fighting for so long against. So let me show it to you. I started to talk about this, the mistreatment at the hands of the Spanish and the Portuguese. There's a rise in nationalism. People are starting to be prideful in their own country, and then the government is not for the people. It's not for the majority of the people. It is for the minority. And here's what I mean by that. So they create a system called mercantilism. Okay, the system is basically the colonies are existing for one purpose, to make a profit. That's it. One thing that they exist to do. So they are taking all of the resources from Latin America, shipping it out, making finished goods, and then they'll sell those finished goods back to the Latin Americans for like double, triple the price. It's a horrible system. It doesn't work for Latin America. It works for the Spanish, but it doesn't work for Latin Americans at all. In addition, you've got this triangular trade that develops. So the awfulness of the triangle trade is shown in Latin America, because what happens is they enslave the Native Americans, the natives, the Aztec, the Inca, the Maya, or not the Maya, but the tribes that already existed. And the natives that are there are being enslaved. They call it the encomienda, but it's the same idea, okay? And then these people start dying in record numbers, and so the triangle trade is going to heat up, and they're going to bring more Africans to the Latin American nations to make up for the difference. And I'll talk about why there's such a terrible, terrible loss in life in Latin America. And then nationalism, if I use that word, I'm talking about pride in one's country, okay? So, here we go. Bartolomé de las Casas is a guy that gives us the historical lens and detail to talk about what happened in colonial Latin America. He talks about what the Spanish conquistadors did, guys like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro, but also guys like Christopher Columbus, okay? And what they did was horrible. He writes it in this book called The Devastation of the Indies. And, reading this book, it is truly an awfully just a terrible tale. Just constantly, they go from one place to another, destroying and pillaging and doing things that I really am not even comfortable talking to you about. Just the lack of care for another human being that we see is terrible. And he's writing about what the Spanish are doing to the natives. And De las Casas, he tells in his book, he says, listen, we need to stop this. The natives are our little brothers. They have souls. They should be instructed on Christianity. They should not be wiped out the way that they are. But he's got a counter to him, and a guy named Sepulveda on the right. And Sepulveda says, no, they don't have souls, and therefore we don't need to treat them like anything. We can destroy them as we see fit. And so you've got this huge debate that's going to define the millennia, which is this. Do the natives have soul? Because if they do have a soul, then De las Casas says they can be saved, and we need to treat them really well, treat them like our little brothers. But Sepulveda says, no, we don't. And I think that Sepulveda's belief that these natives are savages is going to trickle into Latin America, and it's going to create this awful, awful system. So as they're getting rich off the triangle trade, that's the goal. That's why they are colonizing Latin America. They start to increase slavery. They start to spread it. So De las Casas, Sepulveda, they're arguing, and I wish De las Casas won out, but that's not the way that it went. And so he's writing about the conquistadors. He's believing that Spain's going to be punished in the end. He says, we're going to hell for our treatment of these people. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so he's really one of the few people that make a stand against this horrible mistreatment. Now, I just want you to know for your own background that letter C there is Brazil today. That was owned by the Portuguese. So A, B, D, and the Central American territory, that's all Spanish. It was part of this treaty called the Treaty of Tordesillas, not to get too off topic, but the Pope basically said we're going to split it in half. Of course, the split was not nearly equal enough, but the Portuguese had letter C, and then Spain gets every other letter. So when I say Spain, you should automatically say That's right, Catholic, okay? You should say, when I say Spain, you should say Catholic, and that is they are going to try to convert people to Catholicism, and if they don't, then they're going to die. It's convert or die. Very simple, okay? And it's brutal, and it's nasty. Embarrassing in many ways that humans would treat each other this way. And they create a system whereby, the church has a lot of power, but also that the amount of power you have in this society, is based on the amount of blood you have. So if you are born in Spain and you're a full-blooded Spaniard, you have the most power in society. Let's say you were born in Latin America, but, your parents are still Spanish born. Then you are just a little bit down the totem pole. You're what we'll call a Creole. And so the more blood you have, the better off you'd be in the Latin American society. And so they create this hierarchy, right? Peninsulares, people who are born in Spain, born in the peninsula of Spain, okay? Full-blooded Spaniards born on Spanish soil. If you're born in Latin American soil, but you're still full-blooded, you're a Creole, okay? The Creoles are going to be the people that actually rise up and want this revolution to happen. They're so angry because they feel like, why is my birthplace the most important thing here? That doesn't make any sense to me. The mestizos are a mixture of Spanish blood, European blood, and Native American blood. And then the mulattoes are a mixture of Spanish blood and African. So they create the class that's more likely to be like a domestic slave, for example, where you're in the house, you're not out in the fields working. Not to say that that's any better. In fact, in American history, I make the point that there's some awful things that happen to domestic slaves that, again, I don't want to get too far off topic here, but just suffice it to say, if you're on the bottom rungs of this pyramid, you're getting taken advantage of, and it's not a place that you want to be. So, to remember this, for the exam and to make sure that you have the idea behind the social structure, just remember this. Please chew M&Ms, not apples. If you can do that, you can get the Spanish social pyramid labeled correctly. I want to challenge you, so it will be on your quiz. Make sure you know it, okay? Please chew M&Ms, not apples. And there it is. And we talked about who's who. So you got your Peninsulares, your Creoles, your Mestizos, your Mulattoes. Sorry, I went a little fast. But those are the basics, okay? Make sure you have those. Now, they create a system called the encomienda system. Basically, conquistadors get a land grant, and then they demand that the natives work on them. It's kind of like a slave-based feudalism, if you will. And the Native Americans have to work the land. If they don't, the Spanish are going to kill them. Okay, they have guns. They also have something called germs. The natives are worked to death. The natives suffer from a disease called smallpox, and it wipes them out. Okay, absolutely wipes them out. And there are estimates. Approximately 20 million people. It's just a number. It's hard to even fathom. Conceptualize, even dream. 20 million. My gosh, they say up to 95% of the population. I mean, it's maddening. It's maddening. It really is, and so horrible to think. And what happens next is, just more sinister. The Spanish conquistadors, what they do is, because the natives have died off, they replace the natives with more slaves, African slaves. And so we see a spike in the transatlantic slave trade, in the triangle trade, where they're taking and stealing people from Africa and bringing them to the New World because they're killing off all of the native slaves that they have here. It's just a horrible, awful, awful cycle that is created. And so that's what you're left with. So we can imagine why you want to revolt now. I hope I've got that understanding now. So the reasons, or the basic causes of why you'd want to revolt here is the French Revolution. Okay, you're hearing ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The idea that slavery is disbanded in France. It's like, oh my gosh, we should do that. The American Revolution shows that a group of people can take out a much stronger power. Okay, that a ragtag group of Americans can defeat the professional British army. Okay, using guerrilla warfare and things like that. It can be done, is what the American Revolution shows us. And then the social structure, the please chew M&Ms, not apples. The encomienda system, right? That stuff that we just went over, absolutely all of that would be a reason for why you'd want to revolt. Upset that order, destroy that order. And of course the Creoles are going to want to destroy it because they want even more power in society. They feel like they don't get enough power. They are not on the top. They're not peninsulares, so they can't serve in government the way that the peninsulares can. And they're maddened by it. And then you've got the Enlightenment. You know, John Locke, you have your right to rebel if your natural rights are being taken away. Those ideas trickle over. Bolivar is going to study over in France. He's going to study over there and learn about these philosophers. You'd be crazy not to think that he's going to take that back to him and say, hey, this is what life should be like. This is what government should be. It should not be what we're facing. Okay? So, I'll give you a couple examples. The number one example we're going to talk about is in this place called Haiti, which used to be called Saint-Domingue. Just so you know, Saint-Domingue was the French title that it was given, and it was a sugarcane place. They grew a ton of sugar, and it was the pearl of the French Empire. The sugar was just so valuable to the French. They also had a lot of coffee plantations too, and those two tandem goods became cash crops where they could just export them, and the British were using the sugar for their tea, of course. And so, you know, there's something in that tea, man, that just makes them, I don't know, do some very horrible things in history. And in this case, the French are using that sugar cane and they're exporting it to Britain, and then you've got this back and forth and they're making so much money, and they use an unequal based system. They create a system where you have slaves. You have a system where the whites are on top, and the more whites you are, the more powerful you are, and it's a system that is based on inequality. A former slave by the name of Toussaint Louverture is going to take over and try to fight a war against the French, and he does it, but maybe in a questionable way. He decides he's going to try to defeat Napoleon's army. And guys, he's victorious in many ways. He's able to push back the army and make Napoleon have to buy or sell a huge purchase called the Louisiana Purchase. So he's got to sell this huge tract of land to America, and he does this so he can put down Toussaint's rebellion, and still Toussaint fights back. But he's controversial. Toussaint Louverture, he uses the plantation system to fund that said army, that said fight, and so he's using the very thing that he's rebelling against to fund his revolution. It's controversial. He killed his own nephew, or kicked out his best governor, because they questioned him. They didn't give him that total power. His nephew Moise said, "We shouldn't be using the plantation system, uncle. That's not right. We fought against that." And so he had Moise killed when Moise rose up and said, "I'm not following your laws." When a man named Sonthonax, who was a government official that helped Toussaint Louverture, get into power and really take over, Sonthonax was getting very popular with many of the blacks that were underneath Toussaint, and so Toussaint had him exiled. He said, I don't want you here. I need total control of this if I'm going to be successful. So one could look at this and say he's very Machiavellian. He is doing some bad things to get a good end. Other people could say, no, this guy's just taking advantage of a situation in many ways, maybe another time. And I don't quite know the answer to that. I have my own feelings on it, but it's worth looking into. That's all I'll say. He dies in a prison in France. He says that he took a cannonball to the face earlier, and he eventually is captured by the French, and the French take him back, and he just wants Napoleon to talk to him, like as an equal. And of course, Napoleon, with all his arrogance, would never do that, and probably a lot of racism, and so he dies in prison. He does not see the revolution through. A man by the name of Dessalines will actually see the revolution through and make sure that Toussaint's war does not go without a positive resolution. And I just want you to know Toussaint takes a lot of that sugarcane and he's selling it to America, and America is giving him guns in return. So he's using other powers against one another. He would often use the Spanish and the French against each other, and the English were trying to get the island, and so he'd use them against each other. And it was brilliant, back and forth that he did. But suffice it to say, Toussaint is a controversial character. A couple other revolutionary leaders you should know about that you may see on a Regents exam would be Miguel Hidalgo, Simón Bolivar, and José de San Martín of the South. Okay, so Hidalgo, M for Miguel, M for Mexico. He's going to try to lead a revolt, an unsuccessful one, but certainly consider the father of Mexican independence. He starts things. He gets people to think, we can do this. This is possible for Mexico, and we should have our own government and our own people running that government. So M for Miguel, M for Mexico. That's Father Hidalgo. Next one, Simón Bolivar, the liberator of Latin America. He is going to lead in the north. And Bolivar is a master of guerrilla warfare. He is a well-educated man coming over from Europe. He's a Creole, and he really takes what he learns, and he's going to use a very good strategy, but he needs his buddy, San Martin, to help him. And San Martin is from the south. He is coming from Argentina, and he is going to push up, and he's going to use, with Bolivar, a really nice strategy to take out the Spanish. What they do is they use the Andes Mountains. And so because the Andes Mountains, tough to traverse, tough to get through, what they do is San Martin approaches from the south, and then Bolivar comes from the north, and they use this like two-pronged attack, and they meet in the middle, and they use the elevation to their advantage, and they're able to defeat the Spanish with this two-pronged attack from elevation. And so with that, the Spanish are going to be kicked out. And the Portuguese, trying to hold on for a while, but that's not gonna last too long. And so, with these Latin American revolutionaries, with these Creole revolutionaries, we're gonna see independence across Latin America quickly. And I want you to know something. It doesn't work out perfectly. This isn't a situation where it's just like, oh my gosh, we're free and now everything works. Bolivar believed that Latin America should be one big country, kind of like the United States, where it's it's America, right? It's one big country, and then you have small states. And a lot of the other revolutionaries underneath him said, no, we want our own states, our own countries, because we are our own people. And so we'll see a divided Latin America, an underdeveloped Latin America, and a Latin America that has been taken advantage of for so long. It's going to be very difficult for them to learn to use their natural resources to their advantage, and to be able to restore peace, especially with all the different wars that have been going on. There's so much rebuilding, and there's just so much pain in these countries. Imperialism is what they've been up against, and we'll see that once the imperialists leave, once the countries leave, they don't leave a manual as to how to run a country, and they take so much with them that it's so difficult to really come back from it. But they do have independence, trying to be positive here. They do have their own governments, and they're going to try to figure things out, okay? So, here's Latin America in a nutshell. I hope this helped you. I hope this lecture really gave you a solid sense of the Congress of Vienna and Latin America. Thanks for listening, guys.